You ever hear a place cry? Not the wind. Not an animal. A place. There's a canyon out west they call Slaughterhouse, not for what you see there, but for what you hear. People say it weeps at night, like a mother who lost everything. My family never spoke of it out loud. Until I found the necklace. And then, the crying started again. I grew up in a patch of desert that most people drive through without ever looking twice. Dry brush, rust-colored cliffs, and long stretches of sky so big they made you feel like a dot on a forgotten map. Our house sat at the edge of Kingman, Arizona, past the paved roads and cell reception, where the world still felt like it belonged to ghosts. Behind our property, there was a canyon. No official name on any map, but the old folks called it Slaughterhouse Canyon. It ran narrow and deep, like the earth had split itself open and then thought better of it. When I was a kid, we weren't allowed near it. My grandmother, my dad's mother, used to say it wasn't just dangerous. She'd say, it remembers things. I didn't understand what that meant until much later. The land around the canyon had this strange stillness to it. No matter the season, the trees around it were always bare. No birds nested there. Even the coyotes steered clear. If you stood on the ridge at dusk, you could swear the shadows moved just a little too fast, a little too eager to swallow the sun. But what I remember most was the quiet. Not peace, not silence like when you're alone in your room. This was something heavier. A kind of hush that settled over your shoulders, pressed down behind your eyes. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel like you were being listened to. Measured. I used to ask about it, the canyon, I mean. My dad would just grunt and change the subject. But my grandmother, she'd lean in close and whisper like the canyon might hear her even from inside our house. That's where she lost them, she'd say. And when I asked who, she'd just pat my head and mutter, a mother who had nothing left but her children. And the canyon took them, too. I thought it was just a scary story. Something she made up to keep me from wandering. But even then, a part of me believed her, or at least, believed that she believed it. We were a quiet family, not big on stories or traditions, but that canyon, it was the one thing we never joked about. The one place no one went after dark. And the one thing every generation seemed to remember. Even now, I can see it clearly, the jagged line cutting through the earth, the brittle trees, the dry wind carrying sand like whispers. And I remember the first time I heard her voice. But that comes later. The first time I heard her, I was 12 years old. It was late summer, the kind where the days bake the ground and the nights cool off just enough to make you restless. I'd snuck out of the house with a flashlight and a peanut butter sandwich, half planning to sleep in the shed just to prove I could. My cousins were visiting, and they'd been teasing me all week about being too scared to camp alone. I didn't even make it that far. Around midnight, I was crouched near the fence line, staring out toward the canyon. The moon was thin that night, barely a thumbnail, but it was enough to make out the jagged silhouette of the ridge. I remember thinking it looked like a mouth, half open, waiting to speak. And then I heard it. At first, I thought it was an animal. Coyotes sometimes cry out at night, high, shrill, almost human. But this wasn't a yip or a howl. It was softer. Closer. A woman's voice, raw with grief, rising and falling in broken sobs. It didn't come from the direction of the canyon. It came from inside it. I froze. There was something so wrong about the sound, not just because it was out of place, but because it felt familiar. Like something I'd heard before but couldn't place. The crying wasn't steady, either. It would stop suddenly, mid-breath, and then start again seconds later. As if whoever was down there was listening, too. Waiting. I ran back inside and didn't stop until I was under the covers. I didn't say a word to anyone. But I didn't sleep either. The next morning, I found a smear of dirt on the inside of my bedroom window. Not a handprint, not really. Just a dull streak, like something had pressed against the glass from outside and slid down slowly. I told my grandmother later that week, when I thought I could bring it up without sounding ridiculous. Her face went pale. She didn't scold me for sneaking out. She didn't ask if I was sure. She just took my hand and whispered, "She's still looking for them." I asked her who. She didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Mary Elizabeth. She's blood, same as you." That was the first time I heard the name. Mary Elizabeth. The woman from the canyon. The one who lost her children. After that night, I couldn't stop thinking about her, Mary Elizabeth. Not the ghost, not the wailing in the canyon. The woman. I started asking quiet questions around the family, which was like poking a stick into a rattlesnake den. Most shrugged me off or changed the subject. But one of my older cousins, Lena, pulled me aside at a barbecue and told me the story the way she'd heard it growing up. "She was your great-great something," Lena said, squinting at the grill like she wasn't really looking at it. Her husband left for town to find work during one of the drought years. Took the mule. Promised to come back with food and money. She glanced at me. He didn't. Mary Elizabeth waited, Lena told me. Weeks. Then months. With 3 kids in a shack, no money, and barely enough water to keep them alive. When they started going quiet from hunger, she walked them into the canyon, said she was going to find help. No one knows what happened after that. Only that she came back alone. Some say she buried them. Others say she couldn't bring herself to. Some say she carried them home in her arms, talking to their lifeless bodies like they were still breathing. When neighbors finally found her, she was wandering the canyon barefoot, singing lullabies to the dust. She never spoke again. Just smiled with her cracked lips and stared off at the rocks. They say she died right where they found her, still singing, still holding something no one else could see. That's why the canyon's cursed, Lena finished, like it was common knowledge. Why none of us go near it. I remember feeling cold, even in the middle of that hot summer day. Not just because of what Mary had done, but because it explained things I'd never understood. The dreams. The voice. The way Grandma used to touch the old wooden crucifix on her dresser without even thinking. It wasn't just a story. It was part of us. That night, I pulled an old photo album from the hall closet, the one with curling pages and leather binding that smelled like ash and cedar. Toward the back, I found a sepia-toned photo, a woman standing in front of a small house, shadows deep around her eyes, children just out of frame. Her name was scrawled on the bottom corner in ink faded to brown. Mary E. Walker. 1891. She looked like me. I stopped sleeping through the night after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her, not the blurry woman from the photo, but the shape of her I imagined in the canyon, barefoot, swaying, whispering to the wind. And always, something behind her. It wasn't until a few nights later that I heard the second sound. Not the crying. Not the lullaby. This was different. I was lying in bed, wide awake, when I heard the wooden floorboards creak, not inside the house, but outside my window. Like someone was walking across a porch that didn't exist. Slow steps, deliberate. Then, the sound of something dragging. A soft, dry scrape, like cloth being pulled over gravel. I turned on my lamp and stared at the window. There was nothing there. Just my reflection in the glass. My wide, terrified eyes. I should have run to my grandmother's room. I should have buried myself under the covers. But something in me, maybe the same part of me that shared Mary's blood, pulled me toward the canyon instead. At sunrise, I walked to the edge of the fence line alone. It was dead quiet. Not a single bird. The air felt like it was holding its breath. The ridge rose up like a spine, jagged and sunburned. There was a path, not an official trail, but a narrow track where the dirt had worn down. My grandmother had always warned me never to go near it. But now that I knew the story, that warning felt less like fear and more like shame. That's when I saw it. Down in the canyon, right where the path curved out of sight, there was a shape. Small. White. Something cloth-like. I stepped closer, squinting. It was a child's shoe. Old, cracked leather. Faded red stitching along the sides. Not sun-bleached, not weather-worn. Just, sitting there. As if it had only just been placed. And beside it, footprints. Tiny, barefoot, leading away from the shoe and deeper into the canyon. But they didn't continue far. After just a few paces, they stopped, no turning, no ending. As if whoever had walked there had simply vanished into the stone. I stumbled back, the air suddenly too thick to breathe. That night, the dreams changed. I wasn't just watching her anymore. I was walking behind her, through that narrow canyon. And I could hear something beneath the earth, a wet, hungry breathing, like the land itself was waiting to be fed again. I told myself I wouldn't go back. I swore it, over and over, clutching my pillow like it could anchor me to something real. But obsession has its own gravity. And when your family history lives in the dark corners of your land, when it sleeps just beyond the fence, it's only a matter of time before you cross the line. 3 days passed. The dreams didn't stop. If anything, they grew sharper. I began to recognize landmarks, a twisted tree with scorched bark, a rock split clean in two, the mouth of a shallow cave near the riverbed. I'd never seen these things in daylight. But in sleep, I walked them like a map etched into my marrow. Then one morning, after another restless night, I woke with something clenched in my hand. It was her necklace. I didn't know how I knew that, only that I did. A small charm on a rusted chain, shaped like a heart, the kind sold for $10 a century ago. Inside, behind fogged glass, was the faint impression of two faces. A woman and a child. I hadn't left my bed. The doors were locked. No one else had been in the room. I told myself it was a family heirloom that had fallen from a drawer. A coincidence. But in my gut, I knew that wasn't true. That day, I asked my grandmother point blank, did Mary really kill her children? She didn't answer. She just lit a bundle of sage, walked around the living room, and whispered words I'd never heard her say before. She moved like someone preparing for a storm, even though the skies were clear. Then she looked at me, her eyes hollow. She didn't kill them, she said. The canyon did. That night, I went back to the shoe. It was still there. Untouched. And though every instinct told me to run, I crossed the fence line for the first time in my life. The ground felt softer inside the canyon, not mud, not sand, just wrong. Like the soil was remembering every step. My flashlight flickered even though the batteries were new. My breath echoed off the rocks louder than it should have. And then I found it. A pile of stones, neatly stacked in a ring. In the center, scraps of cloth, brittle and faded, the kind used to wrap infants long ago. Bone slivers, too small for animals. And resting in the middle, a second necklace. Just like the one I'd found on my pillow. Except this one still held the scent of old milk and dried blood. That was when I knew, she'd brought me here. Not just Mary. Something else. Something still waiting in the canyon's belly. I should have turned around then. But when you feel the eyes of the dead on you, when the air itself leans in to listen, your body stops obeying normal rules. I couldn't move the way I wanted. I couldn't run. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Someone already buried beneath the stones. So I walked deeper. The canyon narrowed, its walls creeping closer with every step. Trees gave way to rock, and even the insects went silent. I followed a faint path, not carved, not trodden, but felt, a pull beneath my ribs like a hook dragging me forward. The deeper I went, the colder it became, even in the middle of summer. And then I heard her voice again. Not crying this time. Humming. Soft. Off-key. A nursery rhyme I didn't recognize, but my bones seemed to. It came from just around a bend, echoing faintly off the stone. As I turned the corner, my flashlight sputtered and died, plunging me into darkness so complete it felt physical. I stood still, breathing like a hunted animal. And in the black, I heard a second sound. Scratching. Not far. Right behind me. Like nails dragging across old wood. Then a breath, hot and shallow, grazed the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Because in that moment, something ancient bloomed in my chest, a memory that wasn't mine. A warning I felt in every cell. If you look back, you don't come back. The humming grew louder, circling me, folding into itself. It was no longer a lullaby, it was a call. A summoning. I reached into my pocket, clutching the necklace I'd found. I whispered, "I'm sorry," though I didn't know who I was speaking to. When the cold breath touched my ear and I felt the whisper inside my skull, not words, just grief, I did the only thing I could. I stepped forward. One step. Then another. Eyes fixed ahead. The path behind me groaned like a door slamming shut. And just like that, the canyon let me go. The sun was rising when I stumbled out. My clothes were damp with sweat and dust. I didn't look back. Not once. I climbed the fence, crossed the yard, and went straight to my room. On my nightstand was a third necklace. This one was child-sized. A single charm, a broken music note, sharp at the edges. That night, the dream stopped. But sometimes, when I stand too close to the mirror, I think I see something behind me. A flicker. A shadow of someone who looks like me, but isn't. For weeks, I didn't speak about what happened. Not to my grandmother. Not to Lena. Not even to myself. I buried it the way the canyon buries things, under silence, under stillness. But silence is never empty. It echoes. I started finding dust shapes in my room. Not footprints, exactly, more like outlines. Soft impressions on the hardwood floor near my bed. Near the closet. Once, even on the ceiling. And each time, a new name would appear. Scratched faintly into the mirror, traced into the dust on my desk, or whispered through a crack in my dream. Eli. It wasn't mine. One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out the old family Bible my grandmother kept in the cabinet, the one with the gold-edged pages and the smell of cedar and age. Tucked inside were birth records, death records, the family line stretching back 100 years. And there he was. Eli Walker. Born 1885. Died 1891. 6 years old. One of Mary's children. I turned the page. His siblings were listed beneath him. Annabeth, age 4. Thomas, age 2. All died within months of each other. No cause of death written. Just, lost in a canyon. I could barely breathe. I went back to the necklace I'd found, the one with the broken music note. It wasn't a charm. It was a key. On the back, carved so faintly I'd missed it before, was a date. July 14, 1891. It was coming up. And something in me knew, that's when it happened. Whatever took Mary's children, whatever left her wandering and broken, had happened on that day. And the canyon remembered. The night before the anniversary, I woke to a faint noise. A child's laugh. High-pitched. Playful. Just outside my window. And then the sound of something dragging again, something heavier this time, something that moved like it had too many legs or none at all. I stepped to the window and didn't open it. But in the dew on the glass, someone had drawn a crude heart. Inside it, the word. Mama. July 14th came with a stillness that settled over the house like dust. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. My grandmother didn't get out of bed that morning. When I checked on her, she just looked at me with glassy eyes and said, "Don't open the door tonight. No matter what you hear." She didn't ask where I'd been, or what I'd seen. She already knew. By sundown, I was alone in the living room, holding the 3 necklaces in my palm. Eli's charm was warm. Too warm. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, or something older waking up. The sun bled away behind the canyon wall. Then came the silence. Not quiet. Silence. No insects. No nightbirds. No wind. And then the humming started. Low. Distant. That same broken lullaby. I followed it to the back porch, to the edge of the fence. Beyond it, in the canyon's shadow, I saw flickers of movement. Small figures. Children, maybe. Or what had once been children. And Mary. She stood farther back, barely visible through the brush, her head tilted, her arms outstretched. Calling. The ground trembled, just slightly, like something shifting beneath it. A groan, long and ancient, echoed through the stones. The canyon was waking. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know if I was meant to join them, or stop them. All I knew was that they were waiting. And then a single word filled my head, not spoken, but felt. Finish it. I took the necklaces and walked to the canyon's edge. I could feel eyes watching, not just Mary's, but the canyon itself. It breathed around me, slow and heavy. I stepped to the spot where the shoe had first appeared. And I buried the necklaces. One by one, I pressed them into the soil, whispering the names, Eli, Annabeth, Thomas. The canyon seemed to draw in a long breath, like the earth was listening. Then, from the dark, I heard a sound I hadn't before. A sigh. Soft. Peaceful. Final. Mary stepped forward. Not as an apparition, but as something lighter, a shimmer, no longer broken. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she smiled. Then she turned, and the children followed. They walked back into the canyon, into a place I couldn't see. And the air grew still. The silence was gone. Crickets resumed their song. The trees rustled again. It was over. Or at least, that part was. They say some places remember grief the way others remember joy. Slaughterhouse Canyon is quieter now. But if you go there on a warm July night, and listen closely near the riverbed, you might still hear her voice. Not crying. Just singing. A lullaby, meant to keep something buried. But some stories never stay that way for long. Some places mourn louder than others. And some wounds, like Slaughterhouse Canyon, never fully close. If you hear singing in the trees tonight, don't follow it. Just roll over, pull the covers up tight, and remember, the dead don't always want to rest alone. Sleep well, if you can.